Hello, it's me. Today we're going to talk about Project Hail Mary, the third novel from Andy Weir, and the March pick for our Interstellar Book Club read. If you've read this one, let me know what you thought in the comments. I'm going to do plot review, stuff I liked, stuff I didn't like. I'll try and give as little spoilers as I can talking about the plot of the book, but I think the blurb deliberately hints at something and then leaves it out, and I'm so glad that I went into this book blind. So after I told you the premise of the book, it's pretty much going to be spoilers, but I'll mark it all on the time bar. The events of this book unfold after a scientist discovers a thin band of stuff stretching from the surface of the sun to the atmosphere of Venus. Taking samples from it, it turns out to be the first ever evidence we've uncovered of extraterrestrial life, a single-celled life form that is feeding on the energy of our star, and will eventually exist in large enough numbers that it will cause a dimming of the sun's light and an extinction level ice age. These organisms are somehow migrating from star to star and dimming the light of all except one for some reason. The Earth pools its resources together to send a team of recruits to this one star to find out why it has escaped the effects of this single celled organism that they're calling astrophage. But when school teacher turned astronaut Ryland Grace awakens from his interstellar coma, surrounded by the bodies of colleagues that didn't survive the trip, he has to save his species alone. Spoilers now. We're going to talk about what this book is at its core that I didn't really expect. So get gone if you want to go in completely blind like I did. Pretty early on, the storyline takes a bit of a back seat for the large middle portion of the book to make way for an excellent, well thought out, and believable first contact story, which is one of my all-time favorite sci-fi subgenres. It's one about teamwork, similarities, finding common ground. It gets deep into how a first interaction would go. So if you like logic puzzles, mathematics puzzles, syntax, you're going to really enjoy big sections of this book. The star of this book, absolutely the thing that carries it, is Rocky, the alien. They, like Grace, are alone in orbit around the star. Their ships dock together, they begin a dialogue, perhaps out of sheer loneliness, but one which from the off has the end goal of being able to communicate well enough to pull their brain power together and find a solution to this problem. It's the same reason the alien has gone to the star. It raises some interesting questions, like if you learn a new language that comes from a completely different root, would that open avenues to new ways of thinking? Would things like your sense of humor change? Would two species learning to communicate find a common ground in terms of outlook that's a compromise between two very different world perceptions? Would it make a difference to this learning process, being able to understand and synthetically replicate a language that you yourself would never have the ability to speak? Does humor eventually, through connecting emotionally with something, transcend language? Is funny universal? I think a lot of thought went into these questions, as it did Rocky's biology. It's very different from anything we would recognize, but I am pleased as somebody with a biology background that the first thing we meet in space is radially symmetrical instead of bilaterally symmetrical. That was a big nerd moment for me. I think it's absolutely going to be the most likely scenario. When people review sci-fi, they talk a lot about hard sci-fi and soft sci-fi. And I think a lot of hard sci-fi, because of its nature, can contain a lot of what is for the layperson science jargon that makes the story of the book a little obscured, inaccessible, and it's difficult to make a story science heavy without making it feel like a published journal article or a research paper or an essay. Weir achieved that with The Martian, and I think they've achieved it again here. Everything that happens is built up from very simple foundations laid at the beginning of the book, so you really learn about the problems alongside the protagonist. It's the rookie encounters. And you're guided very gently through the steps they take, i.e. experiments, to obtain this new information. It's probably made a little easier that the book is funny, and there's a lot of comedy. Weir writes comedy well when it is back and forth situations. Reaction humor. This can be between two characters, this can be between one character and their internal monologue, and both happen here. With the science, it's difficult to assess accuracy. in a lot of cases in hard sci-fi because they're expanding on a simple core concept. And eventually it gets to a point where it is complicated enough that you don't really know whether what they're talking about is real science unless that's your niche area of study. So if you're the kind of person like me sometimes that picks a book apart over the world build, there will come a point where you just have to start trusting the author and taking their word for it. I think in some ways this has the same vibe as mid 20th century adventure stories for boys literature, with this infallible protagonist tested by their environment, helped by natives, has exactly the right skill set for the situation, is witty and humorous, and also somehow never really in danger. You really know, and this is the case with The Martian as well, that the character is going to live at the end. There isn't really a sense of mortal peril, even though the situations they're in can be pretty horrible. Maybe it's their charm and enthusiasm that kind of offsets the danger. It's also worth noting that in this and in The Martian, I know I keep referring back to it, but they're really the same species of book. Weir has managed to construct a situation without a bad guy or an adversity other than the environment. And I wonder why they made that choice. This feels to me like a story that is built around a concept. And I'd be really interested to know which came first. I can't believe that these two story ideas grew up alongside each other. The astrophage story and the problem that they present, the first contact story and how that's resolved, feel almost like two different books smushed together into one story. Stuff I wasn't too sure about. So I finished this book, and for a good few hours after finishing, I was like, 5 stars, good, sci-fi, fun, action-packed, yeah, loved it. And then we sort of dove deeper into it in our live show, which you should definitely check out. And there are some things about the book that are a little bit, Some of these were brought up by other hosts, but their points I totally agree with. The first is the implication that teaching is an easy job and a fallback job for people who can't stick it in their real jobs. A job choice for scientists who have failed at something. It's a bit insulting to people who have had to work hard to get where they are as teachers, painting it as a bit of an inferior or lesser career choice. I feel retrospectively that the choice to make him a teacher was purely geared towards constructing this emotional end scene for the book, which was nice, but it could have been other things. It could have treated the role in a different way. There's a lot of crowing about assigning gender to a creature that does not have a concept of gender, and I think it would have been absolutely fine had the author not included one line that was like, who knows, they could have 32 genders, I'll just go with he. I think genuinely in that situation the character would be too busy saving the world to be worrying about pronoun propriety, and I really hope it is that and not a reflection of the author. One thing I was really thinking about though was, had Grace assigned Rocky a different pronoun, would it have affected our perception of Rocky as a character, even though the things they were saying and doing were the same? Would we be picking up on different characteristics of a non-human and anthropomorphizing them in a different way had Rocky been called they or she? Interesting to think about. Would the character have had a different vibe? There are quite a lot of tropey characters, especially in the flashbacks, which I'll come back to in a second. You have the crazy, drinky Russian who speaks fragmented English, the suave main character middle-aged man who's infallible in every way. You have a woman who's become a horrible person in order to climb the corporate career ladder. It all has the feeling of classic 70s pulp sci-fi, back when science fiction did need a bit of improving. Not that it doesn't still need improving in some areas. Convenience. I have mixed feelings about convenience in stories. Obviously, it wouldn't be worth telling a story in which everything went wrong. And your story would obviously be set at a turning point when all of the interesting stuff was happening, when things were going right. There were a couple of things in terms of convenience in this story that did make me go, The first being, why was Grace on the ship at all? Why were they adamant on sending him to space when he explicitly says there are other, better trained experts? It seemed like the big boss had some weird vendetta against him, which was never explained, and he was sent to space almost as some kind of revenge act. If she had done it to be vindictive and horrible and to punish him in some way for something, I could understand it, but it just seemed to be a bit of a silly choice that was never explained. The second was that the flashbacks he has after he wakes up in the ship from this coma with no memory. And the flashback sequences that he gets are in perfect chronological order, and always the one he exactly needs to fill in the blanks that he's encountering at that moment. I feel like that's not how amnesia works. I think we really struggle to find things to talk about in the live show with this one. Firstly, it explains the science so well and leaves very little in the way of holes, so there's nothing really to speculate about, to extrapolate about the wider universe. And secondly, it's just not that deep. There's not a hell of a lot to unpack. This is a very surface level, fun, bolshy, action packed book, which would make a good movie, and it does feel almost that it was geared towards that, written with that in mind. And I'm still going to give this 4 stars because it genuinely was a lot of fun. But don't go into it expecting deep sci fi that's going to make you have intelligent thoughts. You can jump into this book and turn off your brain, and that's okay. So thanks for watching this review. I'll link the other hosts, and don't forget to check out our Interstellar Book Club if you like sci-fi. Don't forget to follow me on Goodreads and Twitter. That's down below as well. And don't forget to join our Dark Tower read-along if that's something you're into. I'll see you soon for the next review. Bye.